Hello, and welcome back to the Mr. Persistence Jacob Vandersteen YouTube channel. Today, we are going to be talking about how to handle and face rejection. Now, rejection is actually one of the most powerful concepts and feelings you can reap in your life because once you become resistant to rejection, the emotional weight that comes with rejection, you really become unstoppable because you'll continue to ask for the sale, continue to persist forward even in the face of adversity, and you will break through all the mental barriers that are associated with fear of rejection and the fear of loss and really just the things that are in between you and where you want to go. So, if you're watching this video, you're probably in one of two camps. Either you're somebody who never puts yourself in front of rejection or subjects yourself even to the possibility of being rejected. And as such, you live your life in a very certain way, certain patterns, certain things, certain level of success that you've reached and you've persisted in it for so long that you really just can't handle it anymore. And that's why you're here. The second is somebody who is already facing high amounts of rejection, and you're curious what I could have to say about this particular subject. Now, a background on myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I have been in sales since the age of 15, and I learned something about rejection very young that I lost for a while as I grew and went to college and other things like that. But when I was very young, I learned how exciting and powerful rejection can be, and how if you are inquisitive enough and creative enough and you ask the right questions and you are grounded in value-based communication, as in you're trying to find whatever the value is to that particular person of whatever you are offering, whether it be to a romantic partner, whether it be to a business partner, or whether it be to potential prospect. If you're grounded in value and you're certain in what that value is, you will be much more persistent and you will even desire to experience rejection because you're wired into the success that can come for yourself and the value that can be created for the other person when you push past that rejection. So I would really begin there is what are you offering? What is the particular situation? And what is the thing that you're bringing to them? If it's something that has to do with a romantic partner, we'll really know that oftentimes that has to do with your own self-worth and your self-perception and your self-value if you're fearing rejection or you're worried about rejection in that case. We all have that. But if you recognize that you are a great person, you're fun, you're exciting, you're awesome, you think you'd be a great, spouse for this person or romantic partner for this person, you got to ground yourself within that. So grounding yourself in value is extremely powerful. But if you are someone who's selling a product or a service or you're an entrepreneur, you have to ground yourself in the value of what you are offering to that person, to the market, to the audience, to that particular contact. You get around yourself by knowing what the problems and the pain that person is experiencing and realizing that your solution, that no matter what, you should have a solution that really can solve that person's pain. And when you do, when you really create and innovate and you create the value that that person needs to solve those problems, you'll be more than excited to go ahead and face that rejection. But what if you do that and you start with that value oriented, you feel confident in your value, but you still feel the barrier? And now that's where we get into step two, is you have to acknowledge the barrier that exists and its type. Okay. Because if you just acknowledge there's a barrier, great. You just now you spoke out loud what you were feeling within your own feelings, emotions, body, or mind. But we have to understand the different types of barriers that prevent us from putting ourselves out there to rejection. And they can be psychological, structural, state-based, or physical. Now let's start with the physical. The physical one is you are actually not putting yourself in the position to even be rejected, or, are you physically capable of going and putting yourself out there and facing rejection? Most of the times, the answer is yes. And so if you can look at your own mind and your feelings and your emotions and realize that if what's blocking me is not physical, as in I am not incapable of going up to that person and asking them, or I can actually speak and use my voice, or my mind is able to produce the question that I want to ask this person. Those physical barriers, if it's not a physical barrier, then it is psychological, structural. And so if it's psychological, then you have to look inside and ask yourself questions. and say, what is the barrier that's preventing me? If I push myself through to go and have the conversation with this person, will I feel better about it? And if you're just focused on the action, then you will find that that psychological barrier can be broken through with appropriate action. The next is structural, and that is similar to physical, but it's really, I'll look at it in a different way. So I'm sitting here in an office, and my clients, for the most part, exist online and online in different cities, in different states. And that's really the digital world today, or the world that we live in today. And so, structurally, am I putting myself out there to be rejected? So, one of the ways I can do that is by creating a video. One of the ways I can do that is by doing marketing, by doing ads. Am I even putting myself in the position to be rejected? Right. So, physical is actually, can I put myself in the position to be rejected? Structural is, am I even doing it if I can? Okay. Remember, we got past the physical part. And so, structural is the question to answer there is, what do I have to change about the way that I'm living or what I'm doing so that I'm putting myself in the position to be rejected so that I can achieve the success that I want? And I think that's probably another very good thing to add there. You have to be rejected so that you can get to the thing that you want. And if you're doing that, you're putting yourself in those situations, then you're moving yourself forward. And the last one is just state. And state is, I really just don't feel like going out and being rejected. I feel sick. I feel tired. I feel cold, hungry, whatever. All these things that our mind tells us. And, our state, we feel weak. We feel depressed. We feel whatever. This is where we have to be very creative because oftentimes when we get stuck with a state-based barrier, we tell ourselves that we need to go lose 30 pounds before we'll ever feel like we can go out there and be rejected, or that we need to go work out for multiple hours a day before we can ever feel worthy enough to, or just feel better to be rejected. When in reality, if we think creatively, which at the heart of it, I believe, based off of my thinking leading up to making this video, the fear of rejection is grounded in a few things. But to put it in its most simple form, I think that it's really grounded in linear thinking because you're perceiving that if you go out and try to sell your product to somebody, that they're going to say no and they're going to hate you and that you're stupid and all these other things. And it's very uncreative thinking because there's a lot of different kinds of people out there in the world. Many people who will say, you know what? I'm so glad that you came up to me. You just made my day. And there's a creative thought right there. You could make somebody's day by going up to them. And if you plant that seed in your mind, then you know that now here's the other piece. Probabilistically, there's a percentage of people who are going to say yes and absolutely love your product. There's a percent of people who are going to say, no, I'm not interested. There's a percent of people who are just going to be happy that someone's talking to them or somebody complimented them or somebody shook their hand. And then there's a percent of people who are just mean people and or they're in a terrible state and they feel depressed and they will be mean to you. But if you look at it probabilistically and you say 34% of people are going to say yes, then all I need to do is I need to get, go do, let's say, 500 interactions, and then I'll have 150, 170 people that have said yes. And if I close 10% of those, I close 17 people. And if I close 17 people, then I can achieve this thing in my life. That's the level of thinking you want to get to, whatever it is. And maybe it's, again, romantic partners or business partners or what have you. Probabilistic creative thinking is one component. But I also want to add another very important piece because the true thing that we are fearing, if we are fearing rejection in any way, is at the heart of it fear of loss. And fear of loss, similar to the types of barriers that prevent us from taking action or keep us comfortable, has a few different elements of it as well. But fear of loss comes from a scarcity mindset. And a scarcity mindset is if you are going out to talk to those 200 people and there's only two people that you can talk to, well then you got to do pretty good with those two people. But that would be going off just of who you can reach in that particular moment. And if you allow yourself to be fearful about that particular set of things, then you're probably not even going to ask, and the other person's probably going to try to just take advantage of you up to the time that they can. you know just how it works. They're going to try, let's say you're an expert in a subject. They're just going to ask you enough questions to the point where you go away and you're never going to ask for them to buy the product. At which point that two people is effectively zero because you're never going to ask. But if we break out of it and we realize that there's a big market out there and we can reach that market, if we're creative and effective in the way that we communicate our offer or our pitch or whatever, we're going to meet enough people and we'll be able to ask the questions and have enough opportunity to put ourselves in that life-changing scenario or position. So remember, now that was about scarcity mindset. And scarcity mindset as well is also reflected in the romantic sense. You could be looking at a single person, maybe she's been your friend for many years and you know her, she's beautiful, you guys get along together, but you're just thinking like, what if I ask her and she never wants to talk to me again and then I'm going to lose this great friend? There's a lot of other women out there in the world. All right, I'll just say that. And so if we can break ourselves out of that scarcity mindset, the fear of rejection diminishes. Okay. So that scarcity mindset breaks down into a few things. There's psychological, as in we fear egoically that if we ask somebody something, that they will diminish our status. They will say something that will hurt us, which will harm our ego, which will lower our status, which hurts us psychologically. Therefore, we have fear of loss of our own status and the pain that's associated with that. The next is something like resource or financially driven. I use that example. There's two people that you have to sell to. You need to sell at least one. And now you're freaking out because you have to do it 50% right, which is 5 times better than if you closed 10% of people. If you put yourself in the position to only need to close 10% of people, you need to perform 5 times better. All right. So that's just the math behind that. And so, from a resource standpoint, we might fear that if we only have two people and one person says no, then we only have one left. And if they say no too, then we're screwed and we're fearing losing resources. And with resources, the way that we live, our lifestyles, our comfort, our patterns, fear of loss. All right. And the next would be physical. So that would be actually fearing that if you go up to somebody, that they will respond aggressively. So, for example, in the case of email outreaches, sometimes people will respond back and they'll say, hey, I'm going to sue you and I'm going to figure out where you live because I can't believe you sent me this message. And there's a very, very, very small percentage of people who will say that. But we can't be afraid of those things. We just have to go out and persist and be value oriented and know that we are bringing a value to the market. I'll use the context that I used to sell in, and that was gym memberships. We would call people practically every single day because in my heart, I believed that if they were ignoring me, they were ignoring their health and their fitness and their business and their goals for their life and for their marriage and for really everything that mattered. Because if you're not healthy, it's really hard to be happy. And if you're not healthy, it's really hard to be rich. And if you're not healthy, it's really hard to be a good spouse, lover, husband, what have you. So that was in deep in my heart. So every time I would pick up that phone and I would call somebody, I would just have that momentum within my mind and within my spirit. And I would say, hey, this is Jacob Vanderstein, and I'm calling you again. And I know this is the 27th time I've called you, but Peter, I truly believe that after that first time we talked, you told me that you wanted to lose 35 pounds so that you could go to Bermuda with your fiance and that you two could have a fantastic time. And Peter, I know that because you're not answering does not mean that you do not want this or that you do not need it. So give me a call, Peter. This is Jacob, and I am here at 952-222-7575. And I would hang up that phone, and I know because I had people call back when I would leave messages like that, and they would say, you know what? God, you're right. And so it's like when you just ground yourself and your spirit that you're going to get it, and I'm not even talking about from a spiritual or religious standpoint. I just mean deep within yourself and your being that you are going to bring a value to that person, then press forward. And when you press forward, the glory and the joy, like what I just said to you, brought me so much feeling and positivity and joy. It's like this the fear of rejection is this just the sense of this powerful energy that we're holding within us. And we don't want to let it go because we fear that if we let it go, that it will just be gone. But it always comes back. So, looking back at my notes here, wrapping this up, I want to add a few things that can help add some additional clarity to this. So, I went on a meditation trip over it was actually in December. It's currently January, mid January, and learned something very interesting. It was a silent meditation trip. And, they talk about the elements of the mind, the aspects of the mind. This was as discovered by the Buddha. And the Buddha said that there's 4 parts of our mind. And the first is the part of the mind that perceives. And those are our senses. We can see things, we can hear things, feel things, smell things, and taste things, and feel our position in the world around us, our proprioception. And so we perceive. And so if we see somebody running at us aggressively, we're perceiving and we are going to feel fear. That's the second part of the mind, feeling. And the third part of the mind thinks. And sometimes in cases like that, the mind does not think. The mind responds automatically. And that will be a fight or flight response. But for other things, just using that example, the third level of the mind is to think. Let's say the perception is your wife is bringing you a cup of coffee, and your feelings, you're going to feel warm and good. From a thinking standpoint, you're going to say, I really love my wife. And the reaction is you're going to smile. So that's the fourth part, the reaction. And when we are fearing rejection, we use those levels. We are perceiving. What are you perceiving? That's the first thing you can ask yourself. If you have to go out and sell to a business partner and you're feeling and you're perceiving that person, in our minds, we create our images and our what can happen, and we perceive that person's going to say no, then we are going to feel unworthy and negative and bad if those emotions are triggered in the back of our mind. And then we're going to think, all those things that are not good enough or what have you, or maybe you're logical and tactical and actionable and you need to say, and the thought that comes up is, I need to improve my product. And then your reaction is you're going to go and do that. The whole reason I'm bringing this up is that is a framework right there that you can utilize for your specific scenario. So take the other actions that I talked about, the other steps, but then ground it in that, understanding your own mind in that sense, that your feeling is being generated from a perception, and whatever you're thinking is being generated from your feelings, and your reaction of not taking action is being generated from your thoughts. All right. So if you can break that down and look at yourself through that lens, you're probably going to find what you need to do number 4, and that's take action. So I'll use a personal example. Again, I'm here in my office in Minnesota. I do not need to face rejection pretty much ever, unless I choose to. And if I want to achieve more success in life, which I'm sure that you do need to face rejection. And so, what are ways I can put myself out there? I've started live streaming again, some of my work, making videos, getting the podcast rolling, doing more business deals, selling more, creating more offers, doing more outreaches, asking more people for help, asking more people to work with me, to support me in different ways in terms of the business, employees, partners, and whatnot. Just putting myself out there more and more. And, that is the key. You need to put yourself out there more because let's say, when I put myself out there on the live stream, you can't hide. You're literally streaming yourself live. This is a recorded video that coincidentally enough, I'm streaming on my live stream because, I think that's something that is unique to be able to just see like, hey, I'm actually creating a business here. Come and watch. But basically what I'm saying is by putting myself out there all the time, you have nothing to hide. You just can't hide. And if you can't hide, well, then you might as well just put yourself out there more and get what you want in life. So that comes back around to that root of think creatively. Think creatively about all the different ways that you can get out there and, break through those barriers. And when you do, you're going to feel a lot better. So put yourself in the place to be rejected as much as possible. Just take it on. And the more you do it, the more success and the more happiness and the more free you are going to feel. Because when we fear rejection, what we're really fearing is really life itself. Don't fear life itself anymore by fearing the rejection of a person or a business partner or an opportunity. Just go for it. All right. And the root, which has been repeated throughout, number 5, is approach it creatively and with a value-oriented mindset. If you ground yourself in what you're bringing to that person has value and you approach it creatively and you're saying, if one thing is not going to help me feel better, what about another thing? What about this thing? You don't have to brute force everything. You can do a breathing exercise for a few minutes. It takes 2-3 minutes. You can completely change your state if that's what you need to change. Or you can go run and you can run a sprint and you will feel better in 30 seconds. You don't need to go out and, hike Mount Everest so that you can feel confident enough to ask that person what you have to ask them. So this video was a lot of fun to make. And I am going to include links to my live stream, which I'm going to be live streaming on every day. We have new episodes of the podcast coming out. I dropped a clip to you guys. We're going to do those live as well every Saturday from 11 a.m. Central Standard Time to about 5 p.m. every single Saturday, and a ton of other content coming your way. And hey, I couldn't be happier. So make sure to subscribe to this content, and I will see you in the next video.